Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome to Exile and Bookville's Authors on Tap reading series. If this is all new to you, my name is Javier Ramirez, and along with Kristen Gilbert, co-run Exile and Bookville, a virtual bookshop at the moment, but with a solid plan to become a real live bookstore in Chicago very soon. We have a great show lined up for you tonight, one that I've been relishing ever since we booked it. Clay McLeod Chapman, and I can't help but not get there is only one out of my head whenever I say your name.
You got to do it. You got to do it.
He's the author of the Remaking and has written comic books and books for kids, as well as film and TV. We'll be celebrating his new novel, Whisper Down the Lane, which was recently released out into the wild. So congratulations, Clay. And here.
I only have an e-arc, I'm sorry. I can go grab my boyfriend's Kindle and hold it up.
And I only have the ARC, but the words are in there and that's all that matters. Okay, he will be in conversation with Mallory O'Meara, the award-winning and best-selling writer of The Lady from the Black Lagoon. She co-hosts a weekly literary podcast called Reading Glasses and lives in LA with her 2 cats and is working on her next new nonfiction novel. As I've been saying to anyone that'll listen, Whisper Down the Lane is a totally immersive read, checking off all the boxes in my head, especially that of the true crime nature. Anyone of a certain age knows about the McMartin preschool trials and Satanic Panic of the 1980s. Both of which will play a huge part in the novel. And I can't wait to hear more about how Clay decided to tackle the subject. Thank you, Clay and Mallory, for being here tonight. And for those of you that tuned in today, you can purchase books by both authors through links provided in the chat or visit our website, exileandbookville.com. As an added bonus, each book comes with a signed booklet. And we encourage those of you that are watching to leave your cameras on, but please stay muted until we get to the Q&A, which will be interspersed throughout the conversation tonight. And use the raise hand function if you want to ask a question as well. I'm going to get out of the way now and pass this along to Mallory. So please, everyone, enjoy the show and good luck, you guys.
Yay! Thank you everyone for coming. I'm so excited to talk about this book. Clay and I have known each other for a really long time as both horror people. The horror community is about this big. Most of us know each other. But this was one of the magical moments in this world where you have a friend whose work you're also completely obsessed with. And I love all of Clay's books. This one in particular, I couldn't put it down. I actually, when I was reading Whisper Down the Lane, I put it down to take a shower and I was going to go do the rest, things in the rest of my day. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, I think I just have to take the rest of the day off and finish this. So I'm so excited to be able to talk about it. Clay, how you doing? How's things going?
I'm alive. I'm alive. Things are good. This book came out into the world like a week ago today, and I feel like I haven't really entered into the world very much. So I feel like the book is doing more kind of.
This book's more well-traveled than you are right now.
Yeah. But I'm excited, nervous, terrified. It feels very new right now. Not only just getting a book out there, but getting a book out there now in these crazy times. But
you are a pioneer. Well, let's jump into it. I have a bunch of questions for you. I'm so excited to be. This is one of the very amazing privileges of being an author is that you get to just do events like this and ask your favorite authors stuff that you want to know about their books. So first, we have to talk about, so why Satanic Panic? Why this particular era? Why this particular thing? Did you set out to write this book and I want to write a book set in the set that has to do with Satanic Panic and all the things that were going on during that time period in the 80s? Or did you have a story and characters and you're like, it'd be really screwed up if I put them in this time period and made it even worse?
I feel like, honestly, there are a few different kind of genesis points, but the one that really kind of laid down the foundation for the kind of original idea for the book was, I grew up in the 80s. I was a child of the 80s. I remember the kind of Spielbergian lens flares when they kind of naturally happened in our, that was my childhood. And, we totally had Satanic Panic in our Virginian, I grew up in Richmond, born in the Blue Ridge Mountains. There was a certain sense of we were kids allowed to ride our bikes anywhere in the neighborhood. And like, it was just total, like, we risked life and limb on a, like a daily basis. Like school would get out, we would hop on our bikes. And like, I'm surprised that we didn't break our necks just like riding around, kind of doing stupid kid things.
Because you're a dad now.
Yeah, well, there's that. But like, we totally were like, we could do anything in the neighborhood, but we were always kind of admonished by our parents not, like, don't get in the van with no windows. Don't, like, if someone says they're your uncle, don't believe them if you don't know who they are. And like, that was kind of like, I remember being afraid because there was this kind of mythic, kind of urban legend style, like the van with no like the white van with no windows. Like, it was like a total thing growing up where like we knew that that van was there to kidnap us as kids. So that was that era for me. Like, I knew that fear and I wanted to kind of represent that fear. But like you said, I'm a dad now, and probably the single most terrifying thing for me as a parent is, pre-pandemic, we would see our kids off to school, and I would spend my days basically being like, what's going to happen to them? Are they okay? Like, and like, as a writer, I would do this asinine thing of just like casting my kids in the worst case scenario, like just imagining like they're getting kidnapped right now. Like, oh my God, like one of them broke their neck. And like, I couldn't stop myself from seeing these things or imagining these things. And, like, horror came home for me. But having that kind of dual narrative of like, essentially with Whisper Down the Lane, there are two narratives, one that takes place in the early 80s and another that takes place in like 2013, which just so happens to kind of dovetail quite nicely into my childhood and my parenthood, my adulthood, my daddyhood. So,
Daddyhood. Love it.
But yeah. And then the last thing I'll say about it before we shift is, like, a few years ago, this is a true story. I'm having dinner with my mom, and, I grew up as an only child in a single mother family. And there was like this spell, like this like stint of night terrors for me, like 6 years old. Like, I just had really bad, like, I remember having really bad night terrors, like, so bad that like I would end up like falling asleep in school the next day, like that kind of night terror. And like, I have vivid memories of this. But then, like, a couple years ago, I'm having dinner with my mom, and it's like a jovial kind of like family gathering, and everyone's just kind of like shooting the shit, like having fun. And I was like, hey, Ma, like, do you remember, like, just kind of like harmlessly bringing up that kind of moment in my childhood, and like, do you remember that time when I used to have night terrors and like I couldn't sleep, and then led to this and led to that? And she was like, no, I don't remember that. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, it was like this thing that happened. It was like, I couldn't, I couldn't fall asleep. I would fall asleep in school the next day. And she was like, that never happened. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that totally happened. And like, the two of us had very, very different versions or different kind of memories of this kind of period. And it throttled me. Like, it like totally, like, for me, it was like, well, did this, like, it, and to be clear, like, this is not about like who's right and who's wrong. Like, I'm right, mom's wrong, mom's right, I'm wrong. Like, we just have different versions or different kind of recollections of my childhood. So in my mind, I think to that and I say, well, what else? Like, if I'm wrong and that memory is not real, and I like just kind of go off on this tangent of like, what else is not real? Like, what else of my vivid memories of my childhood are just fabricated? And it just kind of played into that kind of era of like repressed memories, recovered memory syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
like all these things that, during the Satanic Panic period were like really like the kind of foundation for a lot of it. where if a child said it, it had to be true. But I don't know, like it, to this day, like I still, like my mom and I we don't necessarily see eye to eye on what happened, and it freaks me out.
Wow. Well, that actually is a perfect segue to my next question. So it's one thing to live through a time period. It's another thing to have to write about it through an adult lens. Like, so even though you were a kid of the 80s and you grew up then, when you wrote this book, did you have to research it? Did you, what did your research look like for this book?
Oh man. I mean, like, first, please read Whisper Down the Lane. And then as you read it, you'll be saying to yourself, like, oh my God, that's not true. That couldn't have happened. But I mean, a lot of it did. And like what I find kind of astounding is how much, like truth is always going to be stranger than fiction. And, for me, I was reading, there's so many kind of texts. Like I have to give a shout out to this one book called We Believe the Children, which was written by a gentleman by the name of Richard Beck. And I think it came out in like 2015, 2016. And it's the kind of like the fundamental text, I think, of that particular era. And I was reading that book and I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, there's no way that this could possibly be true. And a lot of that stuff kind of, I did the fictionalized version of it and basically stole and put it in my book. But yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's this one called Remembering Satan by Lauren.
It sounds like something that would be in one of those like one of those stores that used to be in malls, like Thankful Memories, or like, or it was like a store in the mall for grandmas where like you could put pictures on everything.
Like the glamour shots of devil worship, where it's just like, the kind of like Vaseline lens soft focus.
Oh yeah, and then you put it on like one of those like sweatshirts for grandmas.
Would you like your picture taken next to Satan? Come to Remembering Satan.
Yes, I do.
Remembering Satan, a tragic case of recovered memory by Lawrence Wright. It is insane. And then there's like another book called Satanic Panic, oddly enough, by a guy named Jeffrey Victor. And Michelle Remembers, which I think was 79, 80. But that was the quote unquote nonfiction book that really kind of like fanned the flames for a lot of the Satanic Panic. So it's more of a kind of like you read Michelle Remembers now and you're like, this is crazy. I would argue that it, as a book of nonfiction, it skews more towards incredulity. But
what's funny is so many people think it's, I mean, I never thought I would be connecting one of my friend Clay's books to Lil Nas X, but as we've seen with the, sometimes stuff like this crops up, like Lil Nas X's new video. There are a lot of people in the world who, for them, Satan is a very real thing, and it's like he is like a person who is wandering around trying to like get your kids to play D&D. Like, for some people it's very real, and it's always very interesting to me to read books like that, and like, yeah, this to us this reads like a weird novel, but for some people they're like, oh yeah, this is a thing.
Yeah, it's funny, I've spent way too much time on Goodreads, but like everybody feels very, like, if you lived through the Satanic Panic era, like you have a very vivid memory of that period. And I think that, like, it's very, kind of like tailored to your memory, tailored to your experience, where, people will be like, well, that never happened. That didn't happen to me. So therefore, this is my Satanic Panic memory. And that might be different than someone else's Satanic Panic memory. But I do think what's amazing is that, like, of that era, if you were born in the late 70s, early 80s, you will have these kind of like imprimaturs, like these kind of like vague recollections of, like, D&D, Ozzy Osbourne, Geraldo, but even like Lucky Charms or McDonald's or Smurfs or Cabbage Patch Kids. Like, it's phenomenal how, like, the depending on where you grew up and what, what your kind of immediate moral, like whatever that kind of like the kind of environment, your moral environment, is that a thing? You're kind of like,
Oh, it totally is. It totally is.
Yeah, like that would be your kind of like engagement with the Satanic.
To be used as recommendations.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about writing itself and a craft. One of my favorite parts of this book is the pacing. You cannot, this book is sticky. You cannot physically put it down. So what were you doing as a horror writer, craft wise, to pace this book and to make it go at such a breakneck speed?
Well, thank you, first off, because the jury is always out as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, in writing it, given the fact that there were two narrative timelines and that it was always going to be, 1983 and 2013, that there was almost going to be this kind of like volley between chapters. And I at this point I keep calling it tennis for liars. Where,
that's what writing is.
Each chapter has to kind of like be a lob to the next chapter, and it usually kind of is volleyed with either an untruth or some sort of like almost like a hand grenade or a depth charge or something that basically the next chapter has to respond to or react to. So I don't necessarily think of them as much as like cliffhangers or like dun 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 moments, but like those weird moments where it's like if something happens in 83, there has to be an echo of it somewhere else in the book, but there also has to be a kind of like an escalation from it. That was the thing. It was escalation. Like everything had to get like more like whatever happens in, chapter 2, like it's got to be, chapter 3, it's got to be a little bit like it's just like, what is it? The boiling water with
the frog in boiling water. Yes.
Like it, so like, I mean, there were drafts where things got hairier, but like, this was the kind of like, this is the right balance, or this is like cranking the dial just enough that you might not be aware of it in those first few chapters, but like, it's like, there's that like, and it just gets, it gets hot, it's boiling.
It does. And it's, I mean, for all folks who have not bought it yet, absolutely, this is the perfect, if you were like in a book slump and can't figure out what to read and can't get into anything, Whisper Down the Lane is your cure-all. It is absolutely fantastic. Love it. And so speaking of being a dad and creepy kids, Whisper Down the Lane taps into a very beloved horror subject, which is creepy kids. But one of the things I loved about it is that it explores this very scary thing about kids having power, maybe too much power, and how that is scary even to the kid, maybe perhaps the most to the kid. Can you talk a little bit about exploring that in this book?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there are a lot of kids in this book. And there's this one character named Sean, and he's the kind of the protagonist of the 83 section. And, Sean, he's 5 years old, and he basically tells a white lie that kind of gets out of control. Like he can't take back what he said, and it ripples out, and then it kind of dovetails into the Satanic Panic period. But, given the fact that like I didn't want to, I wrote from the third person perspective when it came to Sean. And then when it was the 2013 section, it was all first person. But in that, there's something really like, I don't want to be too spoilerific here, but like Sean to me is, he's kind of a vessel. Like there's almost like there's a certain kind of like quality to him where like we have access to his thoughts and his feelings. So we know why he does what he does. But like, for a lot of the adults around him, he's just like another puppet, or like a something to kind of either be controlled or, basically kind of orchestrated. And to me, I like that, like we had the kind of like ability to kind of be in his mind and kind of know like why, like when he's being coerced or when he's being kind of exploited. But like you kind of see it's almost like you see the kind of groundwork for trauma, future trauma to kind of pave the way.
You can kind of envision the future conversations with this therapist.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, and I don't know, like for me, one of the kind of scarier things is like the blank slate kid, like the kid that just offers you nothing, because as an adults are always projecting on kids. Like I like if I see a boy or a girl and they're just like, kind of doing the I don't know, the blank slate, like, you're always like, oh, hey, how's it going, little guy? And they're just like not giving you anything. And that's almost like
kids are the worst audience.
Yeah, it just agitates the situation a little bit more, where it's like, like, and like nothing kind of reduces me more to like some mealy mouth mess than like a child that doesn't give you anything. Like it's I don't know, they're the playing the cards close to the chest, like the poker face kids, they're tough cookies. But in the 2013 section, there is a child named Elijah, who basically is, in the 2013 section, there's an adult by the name of Richard, and Richard is newly married, and now he has a stepson. He's never been a father before, doesn't know what, no instruction manual. But now he has this boy who gives him nothing. It, like, I got to kind of put my all of my kind of anxiety of stone-faced kids, creepy kids, and in that section. So but yeah, I mean, like, there's so many creepy, there's the gray boy, there's like so many like, kids are scary. There's nothing more terrifying than children. As the father of two boys, they terrify me.
Yeah, I think there's something about the sound of like two small feet going down a hallway or across the ceiling. Like that's like one of my scariest horror movie sounds, like little kid feet.
Yeah.
Going somewhere where they should not be.
They're out there. Those feet are out there. You're going to hear them tonight. Like they're.
So another beloved horror trope, which is also one of my favorites, is the intensity of small towns, and that is something you explore a lot in this. So how does this town sort of become a character in Whisper Down the Lane?
I'm a huge Ira Levin fan, and honestly, like, we talked earlier about the kind of research, the nonfiction books. I imbibed, of course, Rosemary's Baby, but like Stepford Wives, I think there's something to be said about, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is like a modern day Stepford, but, I grew up in Virginia. This book takes place in Virginia, but it's those kind of towns that people left. They became kind of those economically depressed kind of small town USA, like they couldn't, afford to maintain Main Street. But then there's that weird kind of return, the kind of like the escape from the cities and the families of today, like, hey, let's have for the money we're spending on our apartment in New York, like let's get a house with a backyard, and and then all of a sudden here comes the coffee shop, here comes the organic grocer, and
here comes all the soy milk.
Here comes the soy milk. And I feel like I don't know if I did a good job of it, like, because I feel like there's definitely something that could be explored deeper in terms of that conversation about what's happening to a lot of small kind of Rust Belt Southern towns. But like for me, like I thought that was a great place to kind of like, if we're talking about losing sight of your identity, and kind of themes of like the kind of artifice of this is what we look like on the outside. We're smiling, kind of beaming, kind of gentle neighbors, but maybe we're actually Satan worshipers, or maybe we're actually, sacrificing animals in the backyard. Like I feel like one of these kind of towns is the perfect kind of geographic embodiment of that, where it's like it's Disneyland for Rockwell paintings, or like the kind of like the 50s kind of like, hey, it's still small town, but it feels more sleek and polished and Wi-Fi'd and craft beered, and like, I'm not being judgy of these towns as much as I'm just thinking it's an interesting kind of veneer. If you pulled it back, like what would be hiding underneath?
Satan, perhaps.
No.
Well, another thing that you sort of explore, which I actually think about a lot. So I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and I hopefully will never have to move back there. But there's something that bothers me about the fact that if I ever move back there, like that town is always going to know you, even if you don't want it to know you. And it's something that you explore a lot in Whisper Down the Lane, is just like your attachment to a place, whether you want it to be or not. Do you sort of feel like that way about parts of places that you lived? Like, how did you sort of tie that into the book?
I mean, well, the past is never going to be done with you. It's really interesting to think of your hometown never going to be is never going to be done with you. What is that? I'm totally going to murder the name of it. You can never go home again. Someone in the chat room, who is far more literary and literate than I am, but you can never go home again. You cannot go home again. Like the book.
It's not. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's something like that.
You can never go home again. I'm just going to keep.
Someone said Thomas Wolfe.
Thomas Wolfe, but you can never not go. You can't go home again. Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Like that feeling of like as a writer, I'm not necessarily writing about myself, and as a genre writer, I'm not writing about myself or the people around me, but the DNA of those like myself and the family and friends and environment, like, that all kind of ends up in some weird kind of jambalaya of fiction. But, I think for me personally, whenever I go back home, there's always this, at worst case scenario, it's always the kind of like, there's like a sensibility, like people are like, you write some weird stuff, man. But it's always the fear of like not, nobody wants to get in a conversation with me anymore because they're afraid that they'll end up in the book. But
well, it's such a popular horror trope, and I mean I love it. Give me a creepy small town every day of my life. I love reading about them. But there's so many horror novels about someone, grieving family moves to large cheap house in small town. But this is almost it's really sort of own niche in the small town genre, if you will, where there's a part where there's an aspect of the book of like, oh, that town remembers who you are, you know. Yeah. And it's not a new town where you're finding out the creepy town secrets. It's a town that knows your secrets.
Yeah. I mean, God, like oh my God, like just thinking of like all the kind of folk horror, like there's always the urban transplant moves to small town or visit like vacations in Cape Cod kind of, but like, I feel like if you kind of push it just a little bit away, like I wanted to get the kind of like the pristine, like almost that Stepford Wives vibe, but it just feels so bucolic or too bucolic. And it's like, it kind of disregards, I don't know, like it's almost like it wants to kind of, it's like a nose job for, the old kind of like way of doing it. But like, it's still the town, it's still the memory of the place, but I don't know.
It's very Shirley Jackson. It's which is the highest compliment I could ever give to a writer.
That's going on my tombstone. So
I should have put that in the blurb.
It's not. I'll give you a new one.
So I have to ask, and don't answer if it's too personal, but has there ever been a time in your life where, innocuous as it might be, you had to keep a lie going for a really long time and it kind of, in a sitcom-esque way, maybe spiraled out of control?
God. I mean, there has to be. I you know, this doesn't answer the question, but I do remember as a kid, there's always that thing you get caught in a lie. As a kid, like they're like, "Did you do that?" And you're like, "No." And then like you have to own it, and then it's just like all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, I didn't do that thing," and like, you know, like, "Well, what did you do?" And you're like, "Well, you know, like," and then you make up some like elaborate, like you can never go back from that. Like once you kind of say the lie, it ripples and ripples, and you just, you know, there's no kind of damage control that you can do to kind of make it all go away. I am dreading all of my ex-girlfriends suddenly like watching this video a week from now, a month from now, and being like, "He lied," like, you know, like there's got to be something. Like I'm not, my hands are not clean. I will admit that I am like,
I think we've all had that. Like I'm a very heavily tattooed person, and my grandfather has still never seen my tattoos, and for a really long time, it was one of those things where I just didn't show him them. And then one day, I was visiting him, and he said, "Oh God, I saw a girl at the grocery store with a tattoo on her chest. Isn't that the worst thing ever?" And I was like, yes, I have 2 tattoos on my chest, 3 tattoos on my chest. And then it just sort of spiraled out of control. And like, even in middle of August, I'd be at my grandfather's house with a scarf and like mittens on. So this book is very interesting in that it explores how that can happen with a kid, but, you know, have these consequences that no one can really expect. I think it's, so how did you weave all that?
I mean, it's amazing that like, I mean, there's almost something kind of pitiful or like tragic about thinking of like the adult who still kind of acts in that kind of childlike way of like, you know, did you eat all the ice cream in the kitchen? No. And like,
it was the dog.
I mean, and I feel like I've done that plenty of times, but because I always eat the ice cream. But like, there's what I will say is this, in the book, and I think in life and a lot of what's happening right now, this kind of skews, this is a sidebar. There is the truth, there are facts, but there is belief systems. There's like, I can believe something and it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to exist in any sort of kind of foundational, logical way. But I can believe a lie. I can believe I feel like there's probably been that version in my life where like I told a lie and it was like the most harmless white lie, but I just had to hold on to it long enough that it suddenly like ossifies into fact in my head, where it's like, well, yeah, the dog ate the ice cream. Like what other, I'm starting to believe it enough because I've told that lie long enough that like the version, like whatever the truth is, maybe it doesn't exist, or I forgot the truth and like suddenly bought into the fabrication. But yeah, I think that like with Whisper Down the Lane, like it's totally, you have a character named Richard who has been, essentially kind of fibbing for long enough that like, at a certain point it's hard to keep up, but also remember what the truth is.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna give the audience a heads up. Clay and I are going to clearly keep talking, but if you have any questions for Clay, now is the time to do them. Drop them in the chat, and I will pass them on here. Or you can.
Oh, I got an idea. Oh. How about I do a little reading, and then they can, that'll give them a chance to kind of warm up if there are any questions. I'm going to just read the first couple pages from the first part of the book. If anything, all you need to know is, like I said, there's 2 sections, 83 and 2013. This is 2013, and this is from Richard's perspective. And Richard is in his early to mid 30s. But yeah, this is the very, very, very beginning of Whisper down the lane. So here we go. They found Professor Howdy spread across the soccer field. What was left of him, anyway. His chest cavity had been carefully cracked open, his rib cage fanning back as if it were the glistening crimson trigger hairs on a Venus flytrap, patiently waiting for its prey to wander inside its gaping maw. The entirety of his intestines, large and small, had been gingerly unspooled to the end of their connective tissues across the lawn in some sort of luminous pattern. I say luminous because his guts looked like beams of wet sunlight radiating out from the rest of his hollow self. Pattern because there seemed to be a particular, methodology to the placement of his organs. Someone arranged them to look this way on purpose, to see. For who, though? I mean, it felt like he was meant to be revered. And I say revered because, even in my eye, there was something beatific to the way his body was presented. Holy, almost. And trust me, this is coming from a completely non-religious person. I mean, I've never even set foot inside a church. Well, that's not entirely true. I mean, there were a few visits to Sunday school that I can barely recall at this point. Distant memories by now. I vaguely remember taking communion as a kid once. Take and eat, the pastor said as he pressed a stale cracker past my lips. For this is my body. And that dry sacramental wafer adhered itself to the roof of my mouth. Now, I couldn't wash out that pasty undertaste for the rest of the day, stuck with this phantom flavor over my tongue. But that was years ago, a whole lifetime ago. All I'm trying to say is, even I could sense the awe of this grisly exhibition, feel it somehow, the downright ardor of it. Professor Howdy's lungs fanned out like angel wings, flapping against the grass. The liver, the spleen, I mean, that is the spleen, isn't it? Were placed with exacting precision. Each organ was its own celestial body orbiting the corpse it had erupted from. His heart now rested in the patch of grass directly above his head, a bleeding crown. Dawn broke an hour or so before our school's groundskeeper, Diego, I think his name is, discovered the poor professor. The morning sun found his body first, pelt glistening in dew. His blood had a crystalline sheen to it against the green, like red stained glass, something that you might see in Sunday services. Saint Howdy, our school's tragic rabbit, angelic white fur and glazed over pink eyes, captured amongst all the other apostles. See, Professor Howdy was always kept in Miss Castavet's classroom. He belonged to the school, its students, but Miss Castavet was ultimately responsible for his upkeep, and that meant cleaning out his cage, feeding him, picking up the poo pellets. The nitty-gritty stuff that nobody, particularly the kids, ever wanted to get their hands dirty doing. Students were always welcome to stop by Miss Castavet's room and pay Professor Howdy a visit. She set up designated feeding hours for anyone to swing on by and offer up a handful of rabbit chow for him to nibble directly out of their palm. And sometimes, on the specialist of occasions, as Miss Castavet liked to say, she would even pull Professor Howdy out from his cage and let him hop about the room. Door closed, of course. There had been this one particular incident, at the very beginning of the school year when somebody, I'm not naming any names, but Benjamin Pendleton left the classroom door open and the professor broke free, hopping down the hall. The ensuing manhunt, bunny hunt, was a school-wide event. See, all the students got involved in the search party, but eventually he popped up in my classroom. And I spotted him tucked behind the tempera paints, struggling to squirm further in. I was hailed as a hero for returning the professor to his cage, unharmed, alive, and in one piece. The new art teacher saves the day, the students all sang out. Hooray, Mr. Bellamy! Everybody loved Professor Howdy. He was, without a doubt, the Danvers School's unofficial mascot. Who would do anything as awful as this to a rabbit? Our rabbit. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop there.
Clay, you're the best.
Hey, that was fun. That's the.
Are you doing you're doing the audiobook, right?
No, someone else did it.
Oh gosh.
I hear it's really good. I hear it's good. I can't listen to it. Not yet. I'm not ready to listen to
Fine.
it.
I've never listened to my own audiobook and I recorded mine.
Really?
Oh, I can't. I don't listen. I won't listen. My boyfriend's listened to it twice. I refuse to listen to it. Our first question is, someone wants to know how we know each other.
Do you want to take it or you want me to take it? Because I remember seeing you first time.
Well, I think we met when I had just moved to Brooklyn, when I was living in Brooklyn, and our mutual friend, Jack Bennett, who I was working, we were working on some project. Jack is a mutual friend of ours who is a filmmaker. Him and I were working on something, and he was like, "Oh, you're moving to Brooklyn. I know I have a friend in Brooklyn. You should totally meet him. You guys would totally get along. You're both horror people." And we met at the Morbid Anatomy Museum Cafe.
No.
This is before this.
Before that, do you remember that Jack brought you to see the?
Oh my God! Yes. I went. So Clay is the most incredible performer ever, and has created. If you are not familiar with his work, created this truly one of the most incredible shows I've ever seen in my life, called the Pumpkin Pie Show. And when I was living in New York, and Jack was there for summer. I don't remember why he was there, but he's like, "I'm going to take you to the best thing I know in New York, Pumpkin Pie Show." And it was on St. Mark's.
Mark's, yeah.
Yes.
It was like
This
one of those
tiny
like,
theater.
basement black box theaters with like 50 chairs.
It's amazing. And Jack refused to tell me anything about it. And he's like, "You don't need to know." And I was like, "Awesome. That's great." And proceeded. It's this amazing horror theater experience. It's tough to describe, but I was just completely blown away. And he's like, "This is my friend Clay. You guys need to be friends." And that was 7 years ago.
That was a while ago. Yeah. 2000.
Oh my gosh.
It was a different world, different era back then.
Yeah. But I moved to LA, but Clay still lives in New York, but we just stayed friends. And we only get to see each other when we cross paths at various book events now.
Yeah, it's a different world, right? But I feel like having the ability to see you now makes me realize that like we're alive. And
we made it.
Yeah, just to flip, the lady from the Black Lagoon, for anyone who has not read it.
Play.
No, come on, please. Like
Thank you.
It's like I asked I asked Mallory to do this, but like it's like if I didn't know her and there was no kind of previous history here, like if I were to pick up the lady from the Black Lagoon, it would be like encountering a kind of like fundamental text. No, seriously, for reals. Like it's an amazing book. Millicent Patrick.
Yes.
I got it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It is like I cannot recommend it enough. I would be recommending it if she wasn't here. Like it is an amazing book that both kind of weaves history and kind of Mallory's own kind of personal existence within this kind of cinematic film industry that we're all trying to navigate in our own crazy ways. But yes, you have to read it. Yes, please.
Thank you. Well, let's get back to Whisper Down the Lane. Because that is the subject at hand.
It goes both ways. Totally goes both ways. But like, yeah. What's really cool, and I mean, you know, Mallory brought it up, is this idea that like there's this crazy, it's almost like kind of summer camp for genre fanatics, where like, you know, there's the film festival circuit, but there are other I feel like there are new festivals, or there were festivals, and hopefully they will return when the world turns back on. But like, you know, we had a wonderful encounter at the Chattanooga Film Festival, which was really amazing. There's this other film festival called the Stanley Film Festival, which is amazing. Which is now the Overlook.
Yes,
which takes place in New Orleans. And they're technically film festivals, but they bring in people like Mallory and myself, where there'll be like immersive theater or book lectures, or you know, like, you know, things that go beyond the kind of standard like screening of whatever movie is coming out. And I feel like Chattanooga Beyond Fest kind of does it a little bit. Fantastic Fest kind of does it a little bit, but like, I don't know, like personally, like the Overlook Film Festival is one of my favorites, and the Chattanooga Film Festival is another. And we get to cross paths there, which is always fun.
So we have some great questions. What appeals to you? So I have Remaking on the shelf. I've ordered Whisper Down the Lane. Both use different eras in telling the story. What appeals to you about splitting the narrative in that way between time periods? Do you enjoy the research, or is it something else that attracts you?
Wow. You know, with Remaking, which is kind of a ghost story told 4 different ways.
Also absolutely fucking brilliant, by the way. If you have bought Whisper Down the Lane and you're looking for more, the Remaking is a genius piece of art. Listen, you get to do it to me, I get to do it to you.
I mean, the Remaking was a lot of fun to write. And like focusing on the kind of specific periods of time, and you know, like, if anything, that was, you know, I don't know how much research went into the Remaking as much as it was just me kind of like fanboying, you know, like I am a genre fanatic, so like it came from a very natural, organic place.
It is weird when you're like, I guess this is research, but it's just in my own brain.
I guess I'll watch The Ring again. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that, like, you know, at least, you know, with Whisper, there was like really kind of immersing myself in the 80s era. There was a lot of research done there, and a lot of it was just purely just kind of like the kind of like the sheer joy of discovery, and the research kind of influenced the writing. So, you know, I don't know if the period details are exact, and to a certain extent, like it's not so much about like, this is the exact date and time where this moment happens, or this lands at this particular moment in history, as much as it was the idea of kind of taking the fever pitch and the kind of tone of the era, and kind of manifesting it, physicalizing it. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but like in terms of structure and writing, Remaking and Whisper, like I don't know, like I feel like they're like these are stories that wanted to be told this way. The next
I think
book,
people think writers have a lot more planned out than we actually do.
It's true, you know. But like, you know, I knew from the get-go, like the construct of like 2 timelines, and like that it would like go back and forth. But then I had to figure out, like, what does that feel like? What is that? How do you sustain that? And like, you know, it was like posing the concept or the challenge up front, and then implementing it and like figuring out how it works. A little easier said than done.
So our next question is actually a question I have for you, but coming from a different direction. Was Danvers a nod to the Danvers State Hospital featured in one of my favorite movies of all time, Session 9? If so, brilliant. I wanted to ask you if you called it Danvers because of the witch trials, which Danvers is very close to the area where I grew up. So I immediately was like, at first I was like, wait, is this Danvers, Massachusetts? No, it is not. So doesn't matter which way it went. Was Danvers not anything, or did you just decide to call it Danvers?
I mean, maybe Javier can help us with this, but like, wasn't Danvers, Massachusetts, like, isn't that where
Yes.
Session 9, like that is like, I mean, yes, there's so many nods to horror films, and like
Massachusetts is a spooky place.
Huge spooky place. And that Session 9, hands down, one of my favorite movies. So I yes. But it was Danvers, Massachusetts, like it was Danvers State Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And is that only in the movie, or was that actually the physical, like the actual location of it, like Danvers, Massachusetts?
Yeah, so Danvers started getting all Massachusetts nerd on anyone. I'll try to rein my Boston accent in. Danvers State Hospital was the actual hospital in Session 9, but what a lot of people don't know is Danvers is the area where a lot of this Salem witch trial stuff actually happened. The town of Salem, as it is right now, wasn't always the town of Salem. Back during the 1600s, the town of Salem was where Danvers is now. But I mean, I have a family member that was in the Danvers State Hospital, like in that particular. That's also the inspiration for Arkham Asylum in the Lovecraft universe. So that particular location is like spooky on spooky on spooky in many different horror universes. So I just sort of assumed that you were tapping into some horror power by calling it Danvers.
Well, funny enough, like I think like an early draft, like the first draft, Danvers was New Salem. Like it was like let's call it New Salem. And like there was like that moment of like, that is like a little too close, like too on the nose. Like, I feel like this whole book is just kind of like peppered with like little Easter eggs. And there's like a moment where even I, who like totally airs on overkill, like I was like, New Salem might be, that's pushing it. That's like wah wah, like
Yeah.
Here we are, like this is what we're talking about now, guys. So, didn't happen, sadly.
Amazing. Another question is, what is the draw from the horror genre that draws you both in not only to write, but keeps your interest as fans?
How about you? What do you think?
Clay, why are we freaks? I love horror because horror is a genre that dwells and sort of celebrates all the things we don't talk about. I am the sort of person that's like, oh, we're not allowed to talk about this thing. That's what I want to talk about now. And that it's horror. Because of that, I think horror is sort of an evergreen genre. There's always something really interesting going on. It is such an interesting funhouse mirror for what's going on in our society at the time. It's always fun to sort of track the problems that were happening in the world during the different time periods of horror, whether it's writing like in novels or in the movies. It's also just cool. Like, I'm just a weird person who thinks that like guts and werewolves are cool. And I just love it. What about you?
I mean, all of that. Like, the genre is such a kind of elastic. It's durable, and it's always evolving and kind of regenerating itself, recreating itself. I do think that it allows for a certain kind of cultural critique that maybe, like if, like, let's say you go to the movies and your choice is that like hard-hitting crime, like lawyer drama, where it's like Tom Cruise is like shouting like, society is, what have we become?
Honestly, Tom Cruise shouting is its own genre.
That's scary to me. Or zombies. where you get the kind of like the metaphor. I feel like the genre has great metaphors that allow us to kind of explore those kind of darker regions of culture, of society, and kind of puts a mask on it. Sometimes the mask comes off and it gets a little bit more probing, but like, I don't know, there's something, the exploration of our fears is, I think it's very healthy. But
oh, for sure. I 100% will attest to the fact that I think horror fans and all the horror people I see are always the nicest, most well-adjusted people. My friend Chris Golden always says this because like we just get all our weird shit out every day. You know, we don't repress anything. Yeah. It's all out there on the page or on the screen. I think horror people are very well-adjusted.
Yeah. Not the rom-com people. Those, watch out for the rom-commers. That's who you got to worry about.
Those are the people with bodies in their closets.
There's another Paul Rudd movie out? Oh. Let me get my jacket.
That being said, though, I never fuck with romance writers. They will come for you.
I will not comment on romance writers. I will not be taking emails today. No complaint anymore.
Yeah, it's fun. I think horror is it's such a fun genre. I almost think that there's sort of a freedom to it that you don't get in other genres. You know, you get to explore so much more because it's this weird, like I said, sort of funhouse mirror, and you get to, it's the metaphors, but it's also you know, I'm a super anxious person, and like I have an anxiety disorder, and for me, watching horror movies is in writing horror and reading horror. There's a comedian that I love he always says that watching horror movies is like taking his anxiety to the dog park, and that's sort of how I feel. Like I'd way rather worry about zombies than like taxes. You know, I'd way rather be thinking about that than like my deadlines. It's very soothing to me.
Yeah. And the horror as a genre has so much. It's a huge umbrella. Mm-hmm. Like I love a good trauma movie tonight.
Oh yeah.
And then tomorrow it's going to be J horror. And then the next day it's going to be, you know, a slash. Like there's just something for everyone. And sometimes it'll be a small audience, or sometimes it'll be a larger audience. But like, I feel like more than anything, any other medium, any other genre, like horror has something for you. And it's just a matter of you finding what floats your boat before it sinks into the ocean.
Yeah, I really agree. There's just, again, there is so much. There's even horror. There's a whole part of the horror world that like isn't scary horror. It just has the horror elements, which is also really fun. Horror is just a fun aesthetic. You know, obviously I'm a goth person who just deeply enjoys, like if I had my druthers, I'd decorate for Halloween all year round. It's just, it's such a fun place. And I almost think that the world not, especially like the Oscars and stuff, the world at large sort of not always looking at horror as the most serious genre, I think is sometimes great for us, because we can do whatever we want.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we're very, very lucky because we get to write it, we get to watch it, read it, imbibe it, drink it, eat it, sleep with it. Like it's everywhere. And I don't know. It's a good time to be scared.
It is. It's always a good time to be scared. I definitely agree. So we are starting to run out of time, and I just want to give a final. If anybody in any of the audience wants to ask Clay anything, talk about any more questions about Whisper Down the Lane, we are here. If not, I think we're gonna start to wrap it up.
All right. Well, then I need to give some huge thanks. I want to thank you, Mallory, for sharing this virtual box with me.
Like, you know, you're the kind of person, you call me up and you say, Mallory, I need you in a shovel and a large tarp. I'm like, all right, I'll be there soon.
I have a rom-com in my closet that I need.
I have Ball Rod in my closet.
And I also want to thank, Exile in Brooklyn, Bookville, Brooklyn, good Lord, for making this happen, for, hosting us. Please, 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 if you haven't bought our books and you're looking for something to read, they are selling them. So you're not only helping us, you're helping Exile, which is really, really awesome. And how else can we be in Chicago right now? We didn't even have to hop on a plane. Like, that's super awesome. So
I'm not even wearing socks. So how great is that? None of us had to look for parking tonight. How amazing.
Win-win. But yeah, and thanks to Exile, but also thanks to all of you who came out tonight and are watching this and are still watching us. It's a very weird time, but I really appreciate it, and it means a lot to me. So thank you so much.
Yay!
Thank you.
Clay,
I have a.
reading was fantastic. Thank you so much for hosting us, Exile in Bookville.
Of course. Before we end this, I have a question for the both of you. I love the horror genre, and you're right. It's amazing that it can cover so many different things. But I was wondering if there are maybe one or two writers that you feel are undiscovered or aren't read enough. That you personally, I'm a huge fan of Adam Neville, and I just discovered him. God, like 4 years ago, and I read The House of Small Shadows, and it kind of blew my mind.
Wow.
It was scary on so many different levels, and he's just an incredible writer. And then, of course, he wrote The Ritual, which was turned into a Netflix movie, which was also very good in its own right. Although they didn't have the right, they cut out some of the best parts, the really sort of gory parts. And but I was wondering if there were.
If folks like Whisper Down the Lane and you like creepy kids, is it the House of Small Shadows?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, with the doll
Another
parts on the
creepy
cover.
kid book. Yes.
Yeah, which also freaked me out. But are there other writers that you guys think should be read more or aren't getting?
It's funny. I'm just now reading this book. Have you heard of this book?
I have not actually.
This book. I'm almost done with it. It's out of print. I don't know why. I feel like late 80s, early 90s horror books are like going the way of the dodo. Like, for some reason, like, I don't know why they're not in print, but this book, it's essentially about tulpas. This idea,
like Twin Peaks?
Well, the idea of like you can manifest an entity through thought. And it's like a Buddhist thought. I was reading an article on Thrill List about The Empty Man. The director of The Empty Man was talking about like his experience of directing The Empty Man, which if you haven't seen The Empty Man, it is wild, and it's like 5 movies in one. But one of his kind of threads is like, oh, I read this book. And it was all about tulpas, and it's kind of based off of a true story about a scientific experiment where a control group kind of performed a very scientifically a controlled seance where rather than trying to channel a ghost, they tried to think of a ghost, like manifest a ghost through the power of thought. And they do. And it's a really good book. And I don't know anyone who knows about this. Like, this is like,
oh my God, hold on. Text me that after.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good.
The last forgotten horror book that I got from you was the one about something next door that I read, The House Next Door.
Wait.
By Ian something.
Wait, the architect?
No. It's called, the title is like The House Next Door or something. You told me to read it. It was a wicked long time ago.
But it is about the art, like the
yes.
That book is
you ruined my life for like 2 days. I love it. It's so scary.
That book is amazing. That book is astounding. Like, that is like best haunted house book of, and it's like,
I love a haunted house book.
Absurdly like the cover makes it look like it's like some like On Golden Pond. Like it's like the
Yeah,
most
I totally didn't. It was not on my radar, and you told me to read it, and I did, and oh my god, amazing.
What is it called again?
Oh God, we got what
It's
is
like
it?
the house next. It's literally called like the house next door or something.
I'm gonna do.
I have quite a few. Because it's like all I ever. My White Whale is always a horror book that really scares the shit out of me. Which Whisper Down the Lane does, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
And the two that I would recommend, one is an extant author who she's still living, Caitlin Kiernan. I am a huge cheerleader for Caitlin Kiernan. I adore her. The Red Tree is a really, really great place to start. It's a great haunted house story. I love her. I love everything she's ever written. But another older, if you were a person who loves old ghost stories and like old ghost story books, Dorothy Mcardle has an Irish author from like, she's not alive. I think she lived maybe 100 years ago. But there's a great press. I can't remember the name of it, but they have been putting out like women's books that have gone out of print. And Dorothy Mcardle has two books that are incredible. I can't think of the names of them off the top of my head because I'm doing an event. The Uninvited, and there's one more, but it's a great place to start if you're a person who loves just like older classic horror but you're looking for like more women writers. Highly, and that's Mac, M-A-C, not M-C. So it's Dorothy Mcardle, and I just adore her. I got to read one of her books when I went to Ireland a couple of years ago in Ireland, and I was like, this is amazing, but also a terrible mistake because I'm very convinced that this Airbnb is haunted.
Did you read The Return by Rachel Harrison?
I love her. I love her so much. That was one of those books that was, Clay, does this ever happen to you where you get a book like way before it comes out and then you forget that it came out that year? Yeah. The Return was one of my favorite books of 2020 or 2019. But I read it in 2018 and I did not put it on any of my 2019 lists because I thought it came out in 2018. But she has a new book coming out this year called Cackle that's about witches. And I am so excited.
That is the best title right off the bat. Cackle. Like how come like that has not been used?
Oh, she's incredible. Highly recommend. And you just did an event with her, right?
Yeah. She did she guest host on a podcast called Writer's Bone. The episode
like Winter's Bone?
Yeah, well, Writer's Bone, but Writer's Bone. Just Writer's Bone. Yeah. Winter's Bone, but no.
What is the Writer Bone? Is it this? Or is it this? Which bone is the Writer Bone?
It's this.
Oh,
you gotta protect.
We're horror writers. We don't have one of those.
Good. Hey, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for sticking around. There's so many books you have to buy now. And one of them is The Lady from the Black Lagoon.
And the other one is Whisper Down the Lane.
Yes, please go to our website, exileandbookville.com, and they will come assign book plates. That was fantastic. Could have more than we could have ever hoped for in this event. You guys were fantastic together. Thanks, Clay and Mallory, for that conversation and for taking time out tonight to be on our show. We could go on. I had other things to talk about, especially horror novels.
We will for Clay's next book.
There you go. We'll have you in the store.
We'll do it again. And maybe in
Chicago. Have you in Chicago. Yes, for sure. We will make that happen. Stick around just for a few seconds after. But thanks everyone for coming out, and have a good night.